So every few years, Gallup does a poll of people all around the world and asks them about their work. The number of people who say they're actively looking for a new gig every year is about 50%. The number who say they're actively engaged and motivated with what they're doing right now is only about a third.
It's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
The other stats are usually pretty grim too. So, I mean, surprise, a lot of people don't like their jobs, and maybe that's always going to be the case. And maybe it's a complicated, wicked problem that isn't going to be solved by any one thing at once. But work should be fun. I realize that's a slightly annoying thing to say and that I sound like a Sunday school teacher, but the science backs it up. And to be more specific, the science says that we should be playing more games at work. Not necessarily gamifying work where we turn routine, boring, rote tasks into allegedly fun competitions. We should be playing more games, legitimate, fun games, at work. Stress, anxiety, repetition, and boredom are bad for us, and they're bad for our work. They're the bane of corporate culture. Play, in most of its forms, is a cure. But bear with me though, because I know that most of us have had at least one awkward, crappy experience with fun work activities, maybe something mandatory, that are meant to build camaraderie but just end up breeding some kind of resentment. Famously, a lot of the fun Silicon Valley offices with beer on tap and allegedly fun laid back vibes are no fun at all to work at. There was a whole expose about Google just recently. And in any case, playing at work might seem naive or impractical. Some incredible, successful people felt that way. Some of you probably feel that way. Here's the fact though. Newly formed work teams experience a 20% increase in productivity on subsequent tasks after playing video games together for just 45 minutes. That's from a study by Brigham Young University. As a team building exercise, it beat out any other activity. So that's just one piece of evidence we'll get to here, but it sets the stage well for maybe the one point I want to get across most. Play has some ridiculously practical purposes, but it only works if it's real play. In too many organizations that pay lip service to a good atmosphere, the actual act of playing is socially discouraged and separated almost entirely from the notion of real work. We think that comes from a misunderstanding of the science behind play. But if we're going to get to the root of what's missing in most work cultures, I think we have to start by diving into what makes play meaningful. And to do that, we need to define play academically. So according to a study on play from Carnegie Mellon, play can be defined as a behavior or activity carried out with the goal of amusement and fun that involves an enthusiastic and in-the-moment attitude or approach and is highly interactive among play partners or with the activity itself. Put more simply, play is fun, play is spontaneous, and it's for its own sake. I think we have to really embrace the definition. When these studies talk about how good play is for creativity or focus or productivity, they're referring to real play. It's one of those things that you can't really fake. Anything else, like a mandated activity that's supposed to maybe kind of look like play, isn't really play and therefore isn't going to work.
Plunk buck.
And I think that's why a lot of corporate attempts to incorporate play don't really play out. Anyway, back to the research. So on an individual level, there's a mountain of research that indicates the positive effects of playing. It reduces stress and anxiety and increases creativity. And it does that by triggering endorphins and by encouraging a state called flow. You've probably experienced flow. The dictionary definition is the feeling of being stimulated, present, and fully immersed in the task at hand. For me, that's when I spend 5 hours writing and don't look at the clock once. So sometimes it's more about productivity and sometimes it's more about fun. But that state of flow is in turn proven to be an ideal time for learning and creativity. And that's because of something that some very smart brain people call transient hypofrontality, where the prefrontal cortex is temporarily deactivated. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for a whole host of things, but to simplify for our purposes here, it's responsible for one key thing: self-criticism. In a state of flow, that self-critical portion of the brain is literally paused. Performance-enhancing chemicals like dopamine and other endorphins flood into the brain, and some of them step up with your ability to focus, while others help you to link new ideas in these meaningful ways. So flow's not a new concept. It was pioneered in the 60s and 70s by a psychologist named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who, in addition to having a fun name, was also full of fun ideas, like the idea that peak performance from world-class experts is almost always linked by this one common feature, this state of flow. He and his colleagues discovered it by interviewing experts from across the world, and regardless of profession, the description of being in the zone was the common denominator. But for the purposes of this video, the point is really just one key idea. The state of flow can be reliably achieved by playing games that are challenging and fun. And once the state of flow is achieved, the quality and quantity of our productive output almost invariably goes up. And that makes sense when you consider how a lot of brain function works. Obviously, I'm not a brain expert, which is why I have time to make YouTube videos, but many of the patterns in our thinking can be described by something called Hebb's Law, a model of how the human brain learns introduced by the Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb, which can basically be summed up like this: neurons that fire together wire together. Or, more simply, thoughts are habit forming. In this case, that means the benefits of play are long lasting. So on an individual basis, we have evidence that playing helps to induce a state of flow, which is in turn proven to reduce anxiety and stress while increasing creativity and focus. Let's leave it there and look at play on a social level. So when it comes to kids and socialization, play is pretty well understood. Some forms of play help practice adult skills and roles, allowing kids to grow in that regard. Others help to build empathy, confidence, and resiliency. And so just in general, it's becoming an increasingly big focus in the fields of child development and child psychology. But here's the thing: as adults, play should have almost an equally large role in our social health, but it's far less talked about. So let's go back to focusing on work to show what we mean. Back in 2012, Google took on a massive internal research project, and its codename was Project Aristotle. Its goal was simple: to find out what made good teams work. A couple years and thousands of data points and hundreds of hours of analysis later, here's what they found. The number one predictor of team success and productivity was a feeling of psychological safety. The feeling that we can share an idea with others free from judgment. That was the number one thing. So we can argue about whether Google themselves have successfully put that finding to work, but the study is there and it's worth paying attention to. If our goal is to build successful teams, and to do that we need teams that are free to express ideas, I'd argue there's a massive opportunity to incorporate more play. In the intro, I mentioned a study which showed a 20% increase in productivity for new teams after playing video games together for 45 minutes. And I think what that shows is something we all know relatively intuitively. If you want to build trust and connection between people, the best thing you can do is let them play together. And that's for the same reason more and more experts are focusing on the importance of play for kids. It lets us experiment and laugh and bond and take risks in a controlled, relatively safe environment while we still encounter challenges and learning moments on the way. So I'm not really doing justice to the whole field of research that's been done on this topic, but I'm trying to go faster here. So to sum up, let's look at the benefits of play as a whole. For individuals, it reduces stress and anxiety while increasing focus and creativity. For groups, it helps build trust and understanding. Those are pretty clear. So my original plan was to end this video by moving forward towards ideas for practically applying this research on play. For example, what companies like Lego have done to incorporate play into their employees' regular lives. But I think more than any other topic, this one isn't going to have some universally applicable solution. It's something that any business should be working towards on their own. So instead, I want to leave you with some questions, and this is more in line with what we do as a company at Big Human anyway. In many ways, we're professional researchers, and our original goal with these videos was to start conversations. So the best way to do that, I think, is with some questions. So here's what I've got. 3 big questions. What I'm curious about is what stops corporations from bringing play to work right now? What are the downsides? I'm also curious about how an organization could build play into its culture, into its genes, without making play feel mandatory, stilted, or awkward. And finally, I want to know, are there ways to bring the benefits of play outside the office and into interactions with customers and other businesses? So that's what I've got. I'm sure everyone watching this has their own questions. And if you want to leave comments or talk to us some other way, we'd love to know what you think. Thanks very much for watching. This has been the 3rd episode of Big Human Ideas.